Picture this. You wake up and the only sound is wind across red earth. No notifications, no commute, no manager named Craig sending you passive-aggressive Slack messages at 8:47 on a Monday morning. Your nearest neighbor is 3 kilometers away. Your power comes from the sun, your water comes from the sky, and your nearest Woolworths, well, that's a 2-hour drive, but honestly, that's a feature, not a bug. Australia is one of the last places on Earth where you can still disappear. Not metaphorically, literally vanish. Buy a 10-acre block for less than a city car park space. Build a life that looks nothing like the one you were sold. The continent is massive, the same size as the continental United States, and roughly 90% of it is empty. The 12 towns on this list are the ones that get it right. They have just enough infrastructure to survive and just enough isolation to actually live. Some of them will seduce you. Some of them will terrify you. One of them might actually change your life. Hit that like button if you're brave enough to see number 1, and subscribe because, trust me, you are absolutely not ready for where this is going. Number 12. Mallacoota, Victoria. There is a moment somewhere on the Princes Highway east of Cann River where the road narrows, the trees close in like a theatre curtain, and you realize civilization has been quietly removing itself from the scenery for the past 40 minutes. Another hour of driving, mostly through National Park, and you arrive at Mallacoota, a coastal town of roughly 1,000 permanent residents, sitting at the edge of a vast inlet system, so beautiful it looks like a conspiracy. Here's the thing about Mallacoota, it almost ceased to exist. On New Year's Eve 2019, as the black summer fires turned the sky apocalyptic orange-black at midday, 4,000 people were trapped on the beach with evacuation routes burned closed. The Navy came by sea. The images went global. And then something unexpected happened. People who'd watched the coverage thought, I want to live there. The population is small, but fiercely intentional. Median house prices hover around $500,000 to $600,000, which sounds like a lot until you realize you're getting a decent home in a place with white beaches, world-class snorkeling in Croajingolong National Park, and a town Facebook group that is, and I say this with deep affection, absolutely unhinged. Arguments about boat ramp etiquette and who left the gate to the tennis court open are treated with the seriousness of Senate hearings. Off-grid viability here is genuine. Solar works. Rainwater collection works. The community has learned, the hard way, that self-sufficiency is not a lifestyle choice, it's a survival skill. The town gets cut off regularly, floods, fires, on the road just deciding it's had enough. What locals actually say on Reddit, Mallacoota is where people come when they're done performing. The internet is slow. The sunsets are violent in their beauty. There's a bakery, there's a pub, there's a boat ramp that is apparently a source of ongoing geopolitical tension. If you want coastal off-grid living without the full existential commitment, Mallacoota is your gentle introduction. But if you thought a bit of fire and isolation was extreme, number 11, Tenterfield, New South Wales. Tenterfield sits at 900 meters above sea level on the New England tablelands, and the air up there has a quality to it, sharp, cool, almost alpine, that makes you feel like your brain is finally running on proper fuel after years of being mildly oxygen-deprived in a city apartment. It's the kind of town where you wear a jacket in January and feel privately smug about it. The historical credentials are absurd for a place of only 3,500 people. Sir Henry Parkes gave his famous Federation speech here in 1889, the one that led to Australia becoming a unified nation. The building he gave it in is still standing. You can walk past it on the way to the bakery. Peter Allen made the whole world romanticize the place with a song. The saddlemaker's shop that inspired said, "Song is now a museum." See, history has been very generous to Tenterfield, and the town has accepted graciously. For off-grid purposes, the New England climate is the real headline. You're high enough to get genuine seasons, proper winter frosts, cool summers that don't require industrial-grade air conditioning, which dramatically reduces energy needs. Solar performs well through the long, sunny tablelands days. Water is abundant by inland standards. Land prices remain reasonable. Hobby farms on 10 to 20 acres in the surrounding district regularly list between $400,000 and $700,000. And you're getting real land, not a postage stamp. The town itself has a hospital, schools, decent broadband connectivity that has actually improved in recent years, and a farmer's market culture that takes itself seriously. There's a craft beer scene attempting to establish itself. See, the locals are a mix of old farming families who've been there for generations and arrivals from Sydney and Brisbane who left during COVID and simply never went back. Crime stats are low. Community engagement is high. The winters are cold enough to make you feel alive without being genuinely dangerous. Tenterfield is the responsible choice, which means the next entry is considerably less responsible. Number 10. Braidwood, New South Wales. Braidwood is what happens when a gold rush town survives long enough to become a heritage village, and then that heritage village is discovered by artists, writers, permaculture enthusiasts, and people who left careers in finance to make ceramics, and somehow the whole cocktail works perfectly. It's a 2-hour drive from Canberra, 2.5 from Sydney, sitting in the southern tablelands at an elevation that keeps the summers genuinely bearable. Population around 1,200. The entire main street is heritage listed. On weekends, the place pulls visitors from Canberra who come for the galleries, the bookshops, and a very good pie. On weekdays, it goes quiet in a way that feels chosen rather than abandoned. So Braidwood is notable because it has a particularly high concentration of people actively pursuing off-grid and sustainable living. The surrounding district, those gorgeous rolling green hills you pass through on the King's Highway, is dotted with intentional communities, self-built earthen homes, serious permaculture operations, and solar and rainwater setups that have been running for 20-plus years. This isn't lifestyle influencer off-grid. This is the original, unglamorous, actually works version. Property in the town itself. Heritage cottages from $450,000 to $700,000. Land in the district, variable, but rural blocks remain findable under $400,000 if you're patient and willing to accept that needs work is not a euphemism, it's a challenge. The community has a deeply practical sustainability culture. You will be taught things, and possibly more things than you wanted to know about grey water systems. But you will be taught by people who genuinely know. One Reddit user described Braidwood as the place that makes you realize you've been wanting to leave for years and just didn't have a permission slip. The town is, essentially, a permission slip. The next stop on our list rejected permission slips entirely and decided to do things its own savage way. Number 9. Queenstown, Tasmania. Nobody warned you that Queenstown would look like this. You come over the hill on the Lyell Highway, winding through wilderness that has been trying to eat the road for 100 years, and then suddenly the landscape strips itself bare. Literally. The hills around Queenstown are denuded, colored in surreal purples, reds, and yellows from a century of copper smelting sulfur fumes that killed every living plant. The town sits in the valley below, looking stunned by its own situation. This is one of the most visually arresting places in Australia. It looks like the surface of a planet that almost made it. A Norman Rockwell painting that someone left in an industrial solvent bath for 60 years and then decided to frame anyway. Your population is around 1,800 people and has been declining for decades as the mining cycles have churned. Median house prices are, by Australian standards, almost incomprehensible. You can buy a 3-bedroom house in Queenstown for $150,000 to $250,000. I want you to sit with that number. That is not a typo. In a country where Sydney median prices exceed $1.5 million, Queenstown is operating in a parallel economic dimension. The climate is wet, famously, persistently, unapologetically wet. Sitting on the wet side of Tasmania's central ranges, Queenstown gets significant rainfall, which means water is not your problem. Power. The area has substantial hydro infrastructure from its industrial history. The broader west coast of Tasmania is wild and extraordinary, with World Heritage Wilderness literally on the doorstep. See what Queenstown offers is the rawest, most uncompromising version of Tasmanian off-grid life. Locals are tough, pragmatic, and deeply attached to a place most of Australia has never heard of and wouldn't understand. There's a dark humor to life here that matches the landscape. If Queenstown is the philosophical wildcard on this list, the next town approaches off-grid living with a completely different kind of gamble. Number 8. Ravensthorpe, Western Australia. Ravensthorpe is a town that exists in a perpetual negotiation with the resource economy. It blooms when the nickel mine runs, contracts when the mine closes, and blooms again when the price cycles back. It has done this twice in living memory. The locals have developed the kind of philosophical equanimity about economic uncertainty that most people only find after years of therapy. But here's what the resource cycle conversation misses. The land around Ravensthorpe is genuinely extraordinary. This is the southern edge of the vast southwest Australian floristic region, one of the world's biodiversity hotspots, and in wildflower season, which runs from August to October, the roadsides explode into something that looks like a botanist's fever dream. More than 2,000 plant species within a couple of hours' drive, species found nowhere else on Earth. It is spectacularly, overwhelmingly beautiful. Population sits around 600 in town, with additional residents spread across the farming district. House prices are seriously affordable, properties under $200,000 are findable, and rural acreage is accessible to budgets that would get you a garden shed in Melbourne. The town has a hospital, small, a school, a general store, fuel, and a community hall that appears to be the epicenter of all social activity worth mentioning. For off-grid purposes, solar is exceptional this far south in WA. Rainfall in the Ravensthorpe Ranges is reasonable by WA standards. The farming district has a long tradition of rainwater dependence and self-sufficiency that predates it being fashionable. While the isolation is real, Albany, the nearest regional city, is about 170 kilometers west. But the community is tight, the landscape rewards attention, and the property math is among the best on this list for what you actually get. The wildflowers alone are worth serious consideration. Next up, something considerably more humid. Number 7. Childers, Queensland. Childers smells like history and sugarcane, and on certain mornings when the wind comes from the right direction, like the jam factory that used to operate in town but lives on in the collective sense memory of anyone who grew up here. It's a small subtropical town in Queensland's Wide Bay region, sitting on a ridge with views that go for miles, and it has a slow-burning charisma that creeps up on you. About 1,500 people live here. The architecture is gorgeous. Wide verandaed Queenslanders, jacarandas along the main street, a clock tower that takes itself very seriously. It was declared a heritage street some years back, which means the main street looks like it was assembled by someone who cared about aesthetics rather than just parking access. The Wide Bay hinterland around Childers is farming country, macadamias, avocados, sugarcane, cattle. The land is reasonably priced compared to the coast, which is only about 45 minutes east toward Bundaberg and Bargara. That proximity to the coast is a genuine advantage. You get the slower inland pace and land prices with Saltaire Beach access when required by the soul. Off-grid viability is strong. The subtropical climate means serious solar output, warm winters that don't demand expensive heating, and rainfall that, while seasonal and occasionally dramatic, is generally adequate for tank water systems. Growing food here is almost embarrassingly easy. The climate does most of the work. A backyard in Childers in peak summer looks like it's trying to outperform itself. Property prices are among the more accessible on this list. See houses in the $300,000 to $450,000 range. Rural acreage around the district is available and productive. What Childers isn't is exciting in the way cities define the word. It is deeply, almost aggressively quiet. If you're arriving from a capital city, the silence will take some adjustment. Give it 3 months. Most people stop noticing and start breathing properly. The next entry makes Childers look like Times Square by comparison. Number 6. Cloncurry, Queensland. Imagine the thermometer hits 53.1 degrees Celsius. Not a heat wave anomaly, a record. A reading so extreme it stood as Australia's official hottest temperature for 60 years before being controversially revised. That's Cloncurry in 1889. The town itself has never entirely recovered from the reputation, nor has it seemed particularly bothered about doing so. Cloncurry sits deep in northwest Queensland, 770 kilometers inland from Townsville on the Flinders Highway. population of about 3,000, which makes it a significant regional centre by outback Queensland standards. It has a hospital, schools, a supermarket, fuel, a surprisingly good museum, and the John Flynn Memorial, a monument to the Reverend John Flynn. Horji, who founded the Royal Flying Doctor Service here in 1928, because the alternative was watching people die from treatable injuries in a landscape that swallowed ambulances whole. The heat is the headline, but it's not the whole story. Winters in Cloncurry are staggeringly perfect. Warm, sunny days, cool nights, endless blue sky, the kind of dry, comfortable cold that feels like a reward. June and July in Cloncurry are genuinely paradise for people who like warm days without the existential weight of humidity. Off-grid living here means solar is in almost violent abundance. Land is cheap, rural properties in the Cloncurry district at prices that seem fictional to anyone who's recently attended an open house in Brisbane. Water is the genuine challenge. You're in semi-arid country and rainfall is highly variable. Bore water, tank storage, and careful water management are not optional. They are the price of admission. What Cloncurry gives in return is a sky so vast and dark at night that first-time visitors routinely stop their cars and just stand on the road in silence. There's no light pollution for hundreds of kilometers. The Milky Way is a physical presence. It looks like someone spilled something on purpose. After the sky of Cloncurry, the next town lives entirely underground. Number 5. Coober Pedy, South Australia. Let me tell you about the day someone in Coober Pedy decided to solve their cooling problem by digging sideways into a hill. This was not madness. This was engineering. The result, an underground dwelling called a dugout, maintains a natural temperature of around 23 degrees Celsius year-round, regardless of what the surface is doing, which in Coober Pedy can include 50-degree days in summer that turn the landscape into something from a Lars von Trier film about the sun's personal grievances. Coober Pedy is the opal capital of the world, producing roughly 70 to 80% of the global supply, and it is one of the genuinely most surreal inhabited places on the planet. Population of about 2,000 across a bizarre moonscape of mullock heaps, the mounds of excavated earth from opal mining, underground homes, underground churches, an underground bar, and a golf course played on brown dust with no grass because grass would require water, and water is shipped in at extraordinary expense. Houses here, including proper 3-bedroom dugouts, can be purchased for $100,000 to $200,000. These are not hovels. Many are beautifully finished with natural stone walls, cool, spacious rooms, and that 23-degree ambient temperature that makes air conditioning largely unnecessary. This is, objectively, an architectural triumph. Off-grid solar performance is extraordinary. You're in the middle of a desert. The challenge is water. Coober Pedy's water comes from a desalination plant processing bore water, and it is priced accordingly. Everything about life here is expensive to import, cheap to ignore if you live below ground and grow nothing. The population is famously diverse: Italian, Greek, Serbian, Aboriginal communities who have been here forever, and the social fabric has the intensity of a place where everyone knows the isolation is shared. Coober Pedy doesn't have polite neighbors. It has neighbors. If Coober Pedy is off-grid as surrealism, the next entry is off-grid as mythology. Number 4. Longreach, Queensland. There is something about the Channel Country that doesn't translate in photographs. The light is different here, flatter, harder, more honest, and the land stretches in a way that eventually stops feeling like geography and starts feeling like a philosophical position. Longreach sits in the middle of this, 700 kilometers west of Rockhampton, and it is the closest thing the Australian outback has to a proper cultural capital. This is where Qantas was founded in 1920. The original aircraft hangar still stands. You can eat dinner inside it. The Australian Stockman's Hall of Fame is here, a museum that takes the drover and the cattleman as seriously as other museums take their emperors, and it's right that they do. The pastoral industry that built Queensland's wealth was built by people like the ones commemorated here, and Longreach understands that without apology. Population sits around 3,500. By outback standards, this is a metropolis. 2 supermarkets, a hospital, a TAFE campus, several schools, decent fuel supply, and an airport with regular connections to Brisbane. This connectivity matters enormously for off-grid living. You want to be remote, not trapped. Longreach threads that needle well. Property prices reflect the inland premium that remote living sometimes demands in terms of services. Houses start around $250,000 to $400,000. But rural stations and hobby blocks in the district offer extraordinary value and scale. The land here is real land. Hundreds of acres of it. The kind where your neighbors are kangaroos and cattle, not fences. And summer is brutal and should not be described otherwise. Temperatures above 40 regularly. But the infrastructure exists, the community is extraordinarily resilient, and the social life, rodeos, race meetings, the Longreach Outback Film Festival, has a warmth and originality that cities manufacture but can't quite replicate. The stars here, like everywhere this far west, are preposterous. But the next stop makes Longreach look like a suburb. Number 3, Birdsville, Queensland. There is one pub, the Birdsville Hotel, and it is doing more work per square meter than almost any other licensed premises in Australia. Roughly 11 to 12 permanent residents call Birdsville home for most of the year. Once a year, during the Birdsville races, approximately 10,000 people arrive from every direction across tracks that would challenge a Land Cruiser, drink the pub dry 3 times over, and bet on horses in a landscape so flat and bleached that the whole thing looks like a fever dream someone's uncle had after a long drive. Then they all leave, and Birdsville goes back to being 12 people, a pub, a general store, a medical centre, a police station, and the edge of the Diamantina River system where Queensland becomes the Simpson Desert. The nearest town of any size is Boulia, on 186 kilometres north across the Diamantina Developmental Road. The drive from Brisbane is roughly 1,600 kilometres. Why would anyone live here? The people who do provide a consistent answer. Because it's free. Not free as in without cost. The cost is everything urban civilization considers essential. Free as in unencumbered. Free as in the kind of quiet that makes most people panic, but eventually produces something clarifying. One long-term resident, quoted in a Queensland Country Life profile, described it as the only place I've ever lived where I actually know what time it is. Infrastructure is modest, but functional. The medical centre provides critical care, and the flying doctor is a phone call away. Solar power is essentially unlimited in this part of Queensland. Water is available, but precious. The community, small as it is deeply interdependent. You cannot be anonymous or self-contained in Birdsville. You will be known and you will know others, and this is not optional. The Birdsville track has killed people in summer. This is not hyperbole. Preparation and vehicle reliability are non-negotiable. But for those prepared to meet the landscape on its terms, Birdsville offers a life that almost no other place on earth can match for clarity. If Birdsville requires commitment, the next entry requires a heat tolerance that borders on pathological. Number 2, Marble Bar, Western Australia. From October 31st, 1923 to April 7th, 1924, 160 consecutive days above 37.8 degrees Celsius. 160 days. This record stands. This is not a historical curiosity. This is Marble Bar's personality, its calling card, the thing it will introduce itself with at every dinner party until the sun burns out. Marble Bar is the hottest town in Australia, perhaps the hottest permanently inhabited settlement on Earth by certain metrics, and it has somewhere between 150 and 200 permanent residents who apparently consider this information unremarkable. It sits in the Pilbara region of Western Australia, about 200 kilometres south of Port Hedland, in country so ancient, the rocks here are some of the oldest on the planet, and over 3 billion years, that the human presence feels almost experimental by comparison. The town is named after a beautiful jasper bar across the Kungun River, which early settlers misidentified as marble. The geology here is extraordinary. Striped, coloured, ancient rock formations in deep red and ochre that look like the earth showing its layers. In the cool months, May to August, when temperatures merely reach the mid-20s, Marble Bar is quietly, unexpectedly spectacular. Property prices are low, genuinely, structurally low in a way that reflects the heat premium the market places on summer. Houses exist at prices that wouldn't cover a Sydney garage. Land in the Pilbara is accessible to determined buyers, and the mineral wealth embedded in this ancient geology means the region has infrastructure, roads, power connections, a medical center, school, that a town of 200 in most other states would never support. Off-grid solar in the Pilbara is a technical formality. The sun is not a resource here, it is the dominant relationship. The challenge is everything else, the insects, the heat management, the water. But the people who stay in Marble Bar, who chose it deliberately, who weathered the first summer and the second, they have a look about them, a settled quality, like people who've passed a test nobody else knows is being administered. There is only one place on this list more committed to solitude and more uncompromising in its demands, and it lives in a state that doesn't think of itself as remote, which makes it somehow even more remote. Number 1. Tibooburra, New South Wales. New South Wales, most populous state in Australia. Sydney, the harbour, the Opera House, Bondi, the Blue Mountains. You know the highlights reel. What the reel doesn't show you is the far corner, the patch of NSW that, if you fold the state map and look at where the fold would go, is as far from everything as it is possible to be within the state's borders. Tibooburra. Population, approximately 200 depending on the season and the mood. Located in the corner country where NSW, South Australia and Queensland meet in a triangle of red dust and mulga, it is 330 kilometres north of Broken Hill, which is itself not exactly metropolitan. The road from Broken Hill is sealed, mostly. The roads to anywhere else from Tibooburra are not. This is the most remote town in the most populated state in Australia. Not let that sit. There are 2 pubs. This is not accidental. With 200 people and no other entertainment infrastructure, 2 pubs is evidence of sound civic planning. The Family Hotel and the Corner Hotel have been anchoring the social world of Tibooburra for over a century, and both have painted interiors that function as folk art archives. Local artists, drovers, travelers, and eccentrics have been leaving their mark on these walls since the gold rush, and the result is magnificent, chaotic, irreplaceable. There is no mobile coverage to speak of. Starlink exists and has changed things somewhat, but the baseline assumption of Tibooburra remains. You are here, and the world is not coming to you. You are the one who came. Act accordingly. Off-grid living in Tibooburra and its surrounds is not a choice so much as the default state. Solar is abundant in this semi-desert landscape. Water is bore and tank, carefully managed. Rainfall averages around 190 millimeters annually, most of it arriving without notice and departing just as quickly in flash floods that can close roads for days. Heat is significant, but the dry quality of the outback air makes it more manageable than the humidity-weighted heat of coastal Queensland. What Tibooburra delivers, and this is not available anywhere on this list to the same degree, is the experience of complete human scale. You are a person in a desert. The desert is not particularly interested in your prior life, your opinions about the housing market, your commute, or your LinkedIn recommendations. The Gibber Plains extend in every direction. The night sky is a religious experience available every evening at no charge, and people come to Tibooburra for weekends and leave sunburned and shaken by how quiet it was. Some come back and stay longer. A small number of them never entirely leave. They're the ones who found what this whole list has been quietly pointing toward, the specific freedom of a place that asks something real of you and gives something real in return. Tibooburra doesn't want your ambivalence. It wants your full commitment or your safe return to the highway. That's not a warning. That's respect. So there it is. 12 towns that prove Australia's greatest luxury isn't the beaches or the cafe culture or the wine regions. It's the sheer, terrifying amount of space still left unclaimed. From Mallacoota's coastal fire-tested resilience to the dead, beautiful silence of Tibooburra, see every single entry on this list represents a life available to anyone willing to trade convenience for something less nameable but considerably more valuable. Here's the uncomfortable truth this list won't tell you on the brochure. Off-grid living in Australia is not a holiday. It is not an Instagram aesthetic. It is generator maintenance at 11 p.m. and water tanks running dry in February, and learning what you're actually made of when the nearest help is 200 kilometers away. But the people who've done it, who've traded the city lease for red dirt and satellite internet and a sky you can fall into, almost none of them come back. Not because they can't, because they don't need to. Drop your pick in the comments. Which one called to you? Which one scared you? Smash that like button. Saki, subscribe if this is the kind of rabbit hole you want more of, because next time we're going even further off the edge. 12 countries where Australians are quietly buying land and building lives that make this list look like moving to the suburbs. You're not ready. Subscribe anyway.